What's going on, everyone? Blizzard dropped a bunch of Enhancement Shaman changes the other day on the 10.2 PTR, and I talked about them a little bit on stream, but I wanted to go ahead and make a quick video on them as well. Let's just start off, read through the patch notes here, and then we'll jump over to PTR and take a look at the new shuffled around talent trees too. And honestly, things are looking really good for Enhancement going forward. Starting with the developer's note here, I won't read through the full thing, but the gist of it is that they shuffled around some talents on the Enhancement tree, they're adjusting some talents to work with both builds, and in order to make Elemental Blast no longer required, or at least have another option to take in its place, Elemental Blast is on a choice node now with a brand new talent, and that talent's actually looking pretty good, but we'll talk about that here in a second. The first real change on the patch notes here are to Elemental Assault, which can now also generate Maelstrom weapon charges from both Ice Strike and Lava Lash instead of only Storm Strike. This is definitely a nice change because it makes it so this talent is actually valuable to the Elementalist build, although we will have to see if the Elementalist build will have the talent points available to even pick this up. This does help Storm single target out a little bit because inevitably you'll have some Storm Strike downtime and you'll have to rely on pressing Ice Strike and Lava Lash as filler abilities, so at least when you press those now, you'll have a higher % chance to generate some Maelstrom weapon charges from those, so I think this change actually helps that build a little bit as well. Then moving down one to probably my favorite change on these notes, Legacy of the Frost Witch now also increases frost damage when consuming 10 stacks of Maelstrom weapon, rather than only physical damage. And this is really cool because this talent is now going to be useful and actually extremely valuable to the Elementalist build, at least in AOE situations, because Frost Shock is already doing a ton of damage there, being buffed up by Hailstorm and Ice Strike, so now you're going to add in 25% more damage to that from Legacy of the Frost Witch. I think that's going to be pretty insane, and this is going to be very fun to play around with. Then they changed it so Primordial Wave is only an offensive spell now. I think it was already being used this way anyway, so this is kind of a whatever change. Then we get into the one thing that people have been talking about as a nerf. Splintered Elements now grants you 20% haste plus an additional 4% haste per extra target hit by Primordial Wave, rather than 10% haste per target hit. This means that in the last patch we could be getting a 60% haste buff from Splintered Elements. Now that is at most a 44% haste buff, but while that does sound like a nerf, and well, realistically yes, it is a nerf, I don't think that it's really going to make much of an impact to us at all. 44% haste is still a incredibly high haste buff, probably the best haste buff in the game, and with our new tier set, Splintered Elements is going to be having much more uptime than we've seen with it in the past 2 patches. Plus, when we were at 60% haste, we are already getting to that GCD cap or going over the GCD cap, so now Blizzard is pulling that back a little bit, but it should make it so haste still feels beneficial to us and it doesn't feel like we're wasting any of this additional haste we're getting from it. And then lastly, we get into the brand new talent here. This is the one on the choice node with Elemental Blast. It is called Tempest Strikes, and it's a passive that causes Storm Strike, Lava Lash, and Ice Strike to have a chance to cause bonus nature damage to your target. This appears to be doing very well for the Storm single target build on PTR. We will of course need to see how tuning works out for this over time, but right now this seems like that might become a staple in that Storm build, and I think that's really cool because it just thematically fits better in there than Elemental Blast does. And then regardless of that, if you're someone that likes playing Enhancement but are overwhelmed with the amount of keybinds that we do have, this just gives you another really strong option that also reduces our keybinds. And then the last 2 things on here are really just bug fixes on the tier set, so let's go ahead and move on over to PTR and look at the new talent trees. Let's first go over here what exactly moved around on the tree. I'll throw up the old version of the tree on the left side so you can kind of see the comparison between the two. The first thing you'll notice is the choice node between Refreshing Waters and Focus Insight, which used to be somewhere down around here, moved all the way up towards the top. For PvE, I don't think this really matters a whole lot. We're never running this anyways, so that is moved up there. On the left side, you'll notice that Windfury Totem has moved over here, kind of where Sundering used to be around, and then over on the right side, where Windfury used to be, that is where Sundering moved over to, and then right below that, Feral Lunge also moved over to the right side of the tree. The really big thing that moved, I think, is going to be the Elemental Blast node here, which is of course now the choice node. This used to be all the way down here at the bottom, or well, not quite bottom left, but towards the bottom left hand side of the tree, and because of that, it caused some awkward pathing for the Elementalist build where we had to pick up Storm's Wrath to path over to it. But Storm's Wrath, the Elementalist build, never really liked because we didn't care about Storm Strike in that build. So now having this up here kind of frees up an entire talent point for that build to use. So I think this is in a much better place now. Storm's Wrath has stayed the same, and then Storm's Blast has now moved over to the left. It used to be in the center here. That just shifted over to take the spot of Elemental Blast. And that's pretty much everything that moved on the tree. It doesn't seem like a whole lot, but this actually opens up some opportunities for us to do some different things, especially with the Elementalist build. Let's first talk about this Storm single target build though, because honestly, if we look at the talent setup for this, I don't think it really changes at all. So let me go ahead, I'll reset the right side of the tree. Two key things for Storm single target, we obviously want the bottom right hand of the tree here, and then we want a path on the left side here. So I'll go ahead and toss in my points here, take Wind Fury Totem because this is going to be for raid, definitely going to want to be running that, and then you want the Maelstrom talents here in the center. Lava Lash and Ice Strike are always going to be picked up here, and probably 1 point in Molten Assault as well. And then I can take Doomwind, Storm's Wrath, Storm Blast, Elemental Weapons. The center, pretty much going to leave this open, but we do want to take Sundering here because this is going to be the pathing we need to get down to the right hand side of the tree. Take Storm Flurry after that. And then our last point here is obviously going to go in this choice node between Elemental Blast and Tempest Strikes. I'm actually thinking we're going to run Tempest Strikes now. Here's a damage breakdown. I did a little bit of testing of this, and of course, a lot more testing needs to be done, but in my breakdown of hitting a target dummy between running Tempest Strikes and Elemental Blast, Tempest Strike is actually doing pretty respectable damage. I had it around 8.4%, and yes, this is less than the Elemental Blast damage. However, it's just putting more damage into Lightning Bolts, and then on top of that, that is giving us more chances to proc Static Accumulations, refund of Maelstrom weapon stacks, and so I think that that could push it above Elemental Blast. In my testing, I also did do more damage running Tempest Strikes overall than I did in Elemental Blast, but of course a lot more testing needs to be done on this. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of sims running between now and when this goes live, and then of course whatever other tuning happens. But for now, anyways, I'm gonna run Tempest Strikes, and then we'll path down to the right hand side of the tree here, pick up Storms, down to Thorm's Invocation. Center of the tree, we want to get 2 points in Witch Doctor's Ancestry, and then our last 3 points are going to be split between Primordial Wave, Elemental Assault, and Legacy of the Frostwind. This build is pretty much the exact same that we've seen throughout all of Dragonflight so far, the only difference really being the fact that we're taking Tempest Strikes here, and even then, if you really like Elemental Blast, you can run Elemental Blast still. I'm sure that's going to be totally fine and very comparable damage. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at a Elementalist setup here, and first let's take a look at a single target build specifically. So Elementalist setup, we're of course going to want to come down and get Splintered Elements, as well as the high hand talents along the right side of the tree here. So I'll go ahead and put in my points, and I do think that this build is going to be a little bit more in line with the Storm single target build now, thanks to the changes to Elemental Assault. Although Storm single target is probably still going to be the better option. We're probably also going to want to continue to run Elemental Blast with this over Tempest Strikes. Elemental Blast probably going to be a little bit stronger with this, especially because we'll have our Elemental Spirits up pretty often. That will boost the damage of that, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that in here, and then of course come down the center of the tree, pick up these talents, and then left side of the tree here. This leaves us with 2 points remaining, and I think that is where the changes to Elemental Assault are going to come in. Since this is going to be giving us guaranteed Maelstrom generation off of Lava Lash and Ice Strike now, I think this is going to be a really good pickup for this build. But it's going to have to be tested in about a week or so, because unfortunately that change is not on PTR yet. Overall, this should be a fairly solid single target build, and if you really enjoy playing the Elemental setup, I think you're still going to do pretty well with this compared to the Storm build. Now, how would we swap this over for AOE? Well, we definitely would drop both the points in Elemental Assault. Not that these are terrible for AoE, it's just we need those points elsewhere. First of all, we need them in Crash Lightning and Crashing Storms for sure, And this is going to get you a build that's pretty comparable to what we've been using for most of the expansion. And honestly, this is still going to be a very solid pickup. But going forward, Wind Fury Totem, probably not really needed in Mythic Plus. It's of course going to be a flex point depending on the comp you're running with, but with how prevalent Augment Evoker is now, probably not going to need this, so that's where you could actually take this point and swap it over to, say, Sundering. And again, this is going to be a pretty solid build and play basically the same as we've been playing so far this expansion. This is where the changes to Legacy of the Frostwitch come in though. Like I said, that is now boosting up our frost damage, and so in Mythic Plus, when we're already doing a lot of frost shock damage, this is going to fit in really well. But how do we get the 2 points for this? Well, we can drop a point out of Elemental Blast here, move that down, and then I think I'm liking dropping a point out of Lashing Flames here and moving that into Legacy of the Frostwitch. Lashing Flames is a good talent, but when we're trying to get all of these frost shocks off and also trying to spread Lashing Flames across all of our targets, I think it's getting pretty competitive with where we're spending our GCDs, and it makes it hard to get the full benefit out of either of those. And honestly, the damage that I've been seeing out of running Legacy of the Frostwitch looks fairly decent and pretty similar to Lashing Flames so far. Again, it's going to depend how the tuning ends up being throughout the rest of the PTR cycle, but if you look at the damage breakdown, you can see just how much damage our spenders are doing with this setup. So this is going to be very interesting to look out for. And again, I think that you can really kind of float these points around between Legacy of the Frostwitch, possibly even Elemental Blast, Wind Fury Totem, and then you could probably even look to float the Sundering point over to Wind Fury Totem if you want to run a build like this, but you also need Wind Fury Totem. You could also even float that point back to Lashing Flames, and if you can get this to work and it's fun to you, then I think this is going to be like very comparable damage no matter where you put these kind of 3 or 4 points or 2 or 3 points here. This patch is looking pretty interesting so far. I'm pretty excited to see how everything kind of shakes out, and I do expect that there's probably going to be some tuning still to come, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Anyways, I think that's going to wrap up this video. Sorry if this was like a little stream of consciousness, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and hope you have a nice day.